Welcome fathers who are looking to inspire their kids and become fearless. This is the Become a Fearless Father show and I'm your host, Klaas van Oosterhout. I'm a father of 2 boys, husband and entrepreneur. This show is created to teach you how to take control and enjoy the most difficult job you've ever faced, fatherhood. I'm going to keep it real and share real life experience. A heads up, there is no magic pill. You will have to put in the hours, sweat and tears to achieve victory. Are you ready to improve your health, wealth, relationships, knowledge and become the hero your family needs you to be? I know you are. So get your pen and paper ready and let's become fearless fathers together.
Let's start off, Mike, with getting to know you a little bit better, you sharing with us your story, who's Mike Flynn, et cetera, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So I am a husband. I am a father. I am an entrepreneur, and I am just trying to figure this thing called life out. You know, how to really step into the light that I've been given and carry it out into the world, and help other people light up themselves so that they can give their gifts to the world. And I do that in a number of different ways, but it all starts with being a good husband and a father first, or trying to anyway, imperfectly always.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, the whole father and husband thing, I have my high standards just like you do, but sometimes it seems like it's a
man. Yesterday I totally failed. You know, I mean, like, you know, we were supposed to go get our Christmas tree yesterday.
Okay.
And my son had a basketball game, and we finished that game. It was raining. The traffic was terrible. It took me 45 minutes to get home. And, you know, we wolfed down dinner, and I don't even really want to go get a Christmas tree at this point because I've got a headache. It's raining outside, and I have a really bad attitude. And, you know, my attitude, it's literally true that your attitude determines your altitude. It's not actually just a cliche. I'm not a pilot, but there is such a thing as a metric in your when you're flying an aircraft. It's called the attitude of the aircraft. If the attitude of the aircraft is correct, you're going to be ascending at a safe rate. But if you have a negative attitude, it's going to, you know, stall and ultimately plummet to the ground. Well, I had a negative attitude, and we got into the car. I was trying to suck it up. We drove to the Christmas tree place that we were going to get our tree from, and they were closed. And it really didn't, it kind of just disintegrated from there. And, you know, the end of the evening was less than stellar. But my wife and I talked about it. We laughed about it. And then this morning, I looked each of my 4 kids in the eye and I said, I apologize for my negative attitude yesterday evening. We did not end the day well. Can we begin again? And I think that we all have to have the courage and the humility to admit when we are wrong, to acknowledge our humanity, and to get back up and start over.
Well said. Difficult. How do you, because it's an ego thing, right? How do you go and battle that ego and then make that a transition, so to say, towards being the bigger man and apologizing, knowing that you were wrong?
Because it's not about me. You know, I want my kids ultimately to become the best versions of themselves. And the only way for me to help them do that, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's going to be a choice that they make in their life. But I can begin to equip them with the tools emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, to put them in a position where at some point they can make that decision, hopefully the right one. But so I have to acknowledge that they matter and that the way that I relate to them matters. And when there's a disconnect there, that I, as the leader of my family, need to serve them and to correct the mistake. Because I also expect them, when they have a bad attitude or they're out of line, I expect them to apologize for their role in it as well.
Exactly.
And so I have to, if I don't do that, then I can't expect them to do that. Like, so for another example, my two sons, their room is in a constant state of mess. And it actually doesn't bother me that much, like them being in a state of mess, but it does bother my wife a lot. And because it bothers my wife, it bothers me, because I know that I'm going to hear about it and how frustrating it is to her that their room is in a constant state of disarray. And I came to this realization the other day that the state of their room doesn't really bother me, because when I was a kid, my room was a disaster also. But what I also realized, that I'm not leading by example there either. In my own room, my wife's area of the room, so to speak, is pretty organized and well put, but I've got clothes hanging on a chair. I've got a jacket hanging on my bedstand at the end of my bed. I'm not necessarily leading by example there. And so I recognized that last night also. And I'm like, well, shoot, if I expect this of them, then I need to expect it of myself as well. And so you have to have the humility to lead in that way. Mm-hmm. and to acknowledge that it's going to take time before they see things, right? You don't necessarily have to speak about it. You have to show them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do what I do more than, what is it?
Yeah.
Do as I say, and don't
do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's what I was saying, right? Yeah. That's what I was saying. I was saying, do as I say, clean your room, have a good attitude. But then they close the door and my room's a mess and I have a bad attitude. So if I want you to do what I say, then I have to do what I say. And I think that's something that we're all trying to do every day, is to be more aware of that. And it begins with self-awareness. Self-awareness is like this umbrella that we're carrying around every day, everywhere that we go. And all of the stuff that comes flying at us, we get to, let it kind of come off of that self-awareness umbrella and allow some of it into our life and discard other stuff, right? Mm. And that self-awareness allows us to see when we ourselves are getting off path, or we're not eating our own cooking, or we're expecting something from someone that we don't expect of ourselves. And that's not a way to build a relationship, to build trust, to build credibility, to fulfill my life's vision and mission and purpose. I have to acknowledge where I'm getting off track and talk to people about it that I know, like, and trust, and that can help support me and get me back on that track.
Exactly. Now, self-awareness, facing reality, those kind of things are really difficult, and most people really struggle with that and try to tell themselves more fairy tales than what's real true. What's your approach or system towards making sure that you stay real with yourself, face reality, and work on self-awareness? How do you approach that?
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I know you're really enjoying the show. Just want to make sure, if you're liking this information, please subscribe and press the like button. And also, go visit becomeafearlessfather.com. You get the opportunity to share your biggest challenge at the moment as a father, and it gives me the opportunity to try and help you overcome this. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Not all men are really great communicators. I think we all have the potential to be, but some of us are wired just to communicate and to talk. And I've always been an open book and a communicator. And so I wear my emotions on my sleeve. That is what people have told me since I was a little kid. And there's a dark side to that, and there's a bright side to that. And in my adulthood, I've mostly got a rap on the dark side of that, the temper, the flare-ups, all that stuff. I can pretty much, control myself there. But on the good side, it enables me to look at my wife and to share my soul with her, to bear my dreams, my fears, my visions, my concerns with her. And then we talk about it. And for most of the men that, if, hopefully are listening, and if you're married or you have someone in your life that you have dedicated your life to, I can guarantee you she wants to hear from you. She wants to hear your fears. She wants to hear your dreams. She wants to hear your hopes. And because of that, what ends up happening when you experience that, and there's that receptivity on the person that you're communicating with, what that's going to do is it's going to elevate your ability to be aware of how you're feeling and how you're acting, and make sure the two are conforming to each other. When you don't communicate and you're just internalizing everything, you have no ability to be self-aware, because you're just disintegrating inside a lot of times, or you're not breathing life into the world or into others, and you're just being selfish, right? And so when you are being selfish, you have no ability to be self-aware, because self-awareness involves a relationship. It involves other people. It's not about you. It's about your impact and the role that you play in other people's story, whether it's you showing up as the hero or you showing up as the guide.
Exactly. That's very powerful. I'm glad you mentioned open communication, and it's something that I'm struggling a little bit with in regards that I like to communicate. However, I also like people show interest and ask me. It's something that I'm working on, but I'm trying to work it on with my wife. But I always say I'm in control of myself. I'm not in control of the other person, right? I'm responsible for myself. I can't be I have a responsibility, but I can't be responsible for other people's actions and results of other people. However, for myself, I can. So I'm just wondering, when does that come in? Because there's a little ego there as well that says, I want her also to come to me and show a certain interest. What's your opinion? What's your idea on my statement in that case, saying, okay, I want.
Give me an example. Give me an example.
Well, for example, with work, right? So I'm working now really hard on become a fearless father, and turning that into make an impact in father's life, but make it a business for myself and make it generating an income. So I would like her to also show interest and ask me hey, how was your work day today? Those kind of things. And I must say, I must admit right away, I have to grow in being more curious about her day and stuff like that. So I'm working on that, but it will also be nice from the other side, right? So where does my ego come in and say, okay, no, I should just talk about it, or I should wait for her to ask me? What's your view on that?
Why is your platform important to you?
For one, it's my way of making. I feel like it's my purpose. So I feel like it's my way of making a huge impact in this world, in fathers' lives and their children's, and I am making an impact in the life of my kids, right? So that's why.
Why is making an impact in the lives of your kids important?
And because I want, just like you, to have them have the best life possible as they can. So that's why that for me is really important. And that means that I have to work on myself and become a fearless father. That's why I'm sharing the journey as I go.
What is the gap between your experience as a child and what you're trying to create for your children?
Great question. My father was what I see as the typical average or maybe good father, as in he would work a lot, make sure that we're provided and have everything, but I didn't see him that much. Plus, his childhood was very different from mine, as my father was a really good father. However, his father didn't care much for his child. So emotionally, for example, my father's very close, and I want to be open as a father and really emotional and loving and caring. So that's kind of the gap, and where I'm trying to take our family's journey, because that's the way I see it, right? We all try and improve. I can tell that my father also continues to try and improve himself. So I'm trying to take that further to the next level.
Is your dad still alive?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a good relationship with him today?
Yeah, great relationship. I actually want to invite him to come on the show as well, but so far he said no.
Are there any areas in your relationship with your father that sting?
Not sting, but as I mentioned, like it would have been wonderful at then, like he's doing it now, but back then that he would have been more emotional, more open, more communicative in the sense of his emotions towards me. That would have been great. Absolutely.
And do you find that there are other men around you that feel the same way?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And so I'm asking you these questions because I think that they're really important for you to crystallize, so that you can share your vision with your wife. You know, the reason she's probably, and I'm just hypothesizing here based on my own experience, the reason she may not be asking you questions is because she might not know the right questions to ask.
Okay, so that's also something then that you bring up as you mentioned before, open communication. You bring up the things, you put yourself in a vulnerable position, and you mention that subject as well to open that as a discussion and take it from there. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and she's probably, and you have to acknowledge that she's probably anxious about whatever changes are going on in you. She sees things happening, right, in your life, and it's different than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
And you've got your attentions placed on this and not on that. And so why is that not important anymore? And this is now important. And what's the impact of not spending time over here and now it's here? And how does that affect our kids? And how does that affect our finances? And all of these questions are boiling around in her head. And it's your duty to bring her on board in the vision and communicate to her the journey that you've gone through internally, and now that you're trying to bring out into the world, and bring her on board with you so that she can not just stand behind you, but stand beside you.
I like that. I appreciate that. I liked also the way that we quickly switched the interview from you to me. That was really nice. That was why I was giggling at a certain second, like, wait a minute, am I interviewing you or are you interviewing me? Awesome. So I really appreciate that. I like that. I like the way that works out. Yeah, I'm going to talk to her about that. Actually, I know that she's going to watch this anyway. She follows me a lot. And I know she really supports me. It's like she's an amazing woman. She gives me the opportunity right now to follow my vision, follow my heart, and walk my journey while she works and brings in at this point in time, the biggest amount of money that we need to survive, right? To take care of our kids. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and I need to overstep my egos. I noticed a lot more lately about ego. Like I see these phases that I'm improving myself, and the ego now starts to shout a little bit like, hey, no, we were back there. We got to go. We got to stay here. We're safe. It's nice. So I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in regards, you mentioned, you're trying to have your kids become the best version of themselves, right? So what I'm wondering, and I've only been able to speak to a couple of people that I've interviewed so far about this, but do you have like a vision for your kids, or how do you go about creating the environment for them that they can develop them in a way to become the best version of themselves without over controlling, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think that the number one mistake that parents make is, well, we all make a lot of mistakes, but I think that a handful of the mistakes that we make are number one, that we don't want our kids to take risks because we're afraid of them stumbling and falling and failing and what that might do to their confidence, right? And as a result of that, one of the things that we do is we try to project our idea of what we think that they're good at or should be good at on them. And it may even be tangentially related to what they're naturally gifted toward. And so it might feed a little bit of their soul, but ultimately it will over time become frustrating to them. So the way that I am kind of trying to manage that myself, and my wife and I talk about it regularly, is through the power of observation, right? We are trying to observe our kids, to listen to their language, to see what lights them up, to see and identify what they're intrinsically motivated to do, right? Where we're not having to cajole them into doing it, right? Where they're naturally driven through skill, ability, or a desire to connect, and give them the opportunity to be in a position where they can further explore that which they're interested in. You know, and whether that's, you know, my youngest son thinks he wants to be what he refers to as a worker, which means, you know, a general contractor, somebody who builds stuff, right? He likes getting his hands in stuff. He likes doing projects and being, you know, at his school, helping the science teacher with their life lab and all of this stuff and building fences and whatever. He likes getting into that. That is not something I've exhibited. He's not witnessed me build anything. That's not my skill set, but I'm trying to position him so that he has experiences where he can further decide and learn whether that is something he is naturally wired and gifted to do. And I'm trying to take that approach with all of my kids as best as we possibly can, given, you know, that we have 4 kids and they're different people. They're all unique. They have their own gifts and abilities, and they're ultimately not necessarily my gifts and abilities or what I would like them to do. But I ultimately want to nurture and develop and shine the light on what they're capable of becoming.
Exactly. Just for reference, Mike, how old are your kids?
My oldest is 13.
Okay.
And my youngest is about to turn 8.
All right, great. Yeah. Just so we have an idea of, you know, where they're at. What's your take? Because it's something that I've seen a lot in the US and a lot with men that I spoke with, is that they're homeschooling. What's your take on the educational system in general? And how do you look on that? And how do you look for your kids in the future? Do you want them to go to college and university? Because a lot of entrepreneurs now are saying, like, no, you should learn it through mentors and stuff like that. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So my kids, they go to a private Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
That's not too far from where we live. It's the school that I went to growing up. And it's a great community. The class sizes are small, and, you know, they get a lot of attention and hands-on stuff, and they're excelling academically, and they love learning most of the time, and they love being part of a community like that, and so I'm a huge fan and proponent of that. We talked about homeschooling, but I love my kids and I love my wife, and if we homeschooled, I think that either my wife or my kids would have died between the first and the second day. So we decided to not homeschool. But as it relates to secondary education, college and above, the higher education world is rapidly evolving, and it's about time. I think by the time my kids are in college, it's going to look very different than it does now. I think college is important, not because of the degree that you would get, because most of the people are doing things today that have no direct correlation to the degree that they hang on their wall, but rather the college experience is one that really helps people think critically, right? To have conversations, to formulate their thoughts based on principles rooted in natural law and order, and that principles that have been around forever. And I think that's something that's lacking today in the it's being discounted, like school's not like college is not important, or higher education is not important, and you should just go learn how to code, or you should just go learn how to do whatever, because that's what the future holds. Well, the future is going to require us to think far more critically than ever before, because most of what's done today in the next 20, 30 years will be automated. And so if we don't have the ability to think critically about stuff like that, what will we have the ability to do? If you look at all of the innovators, they have the ability to think critically, to have a vision, to take risks, and to see things all the way through, to include sometimes failing. And a lot of that is because they have the ability to analyze and to think critically. And most people are not naturally just gifted with the ability to analyze and think critically and identify patterns and risks and all of those things. And they need a community of people around them to help them hone those skills. And at this point, higher education is one of those. It definitely needs to change. It's not sustainable, and it will go away in its current form. But I am a fan of universities and educational institutions helping kids and the next generation really remember where we've been, remember where we've come from, and help them think critically about what the potential of the future looks like.
Excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. In regards to, because I saw your message mentioning that I think it was your first mentor or one of your mentors that recently passing away. I was just wondering, what's your philosophy in regards to mentor? Because I see so many entrepreneurs struggling, and I talk to so many entrepreneurs, and then you find out they don't even have one mentor that they work with, somebody that's further away than they are, to really help them progress at a faster pace, right?
Yeah. Mentors are really important, especially, but just not for the sake of having a mentor, because you want a mentor that is going to hold you accountable and that's going to call you out when they see you getting off path. And the best mentors are people that are wildly curious about your success as much as, if not more than, your own. They are interested in collaborating. They want you to help them, and they want to help you. And they are not afraid to correct you. They have experience. They have been where you're trying to go. They've seen the pitfalls, and maybe they're different potholes that you're experiencing today, but they can help you navigate through setbacks and see things and at least speak to their own experience and correct you when you're getting off course. And And so I think that those things are really, really critical. So the mentor I mentioned is a guy named Dr. Jack Evans, and he really was a man who really saw the hero in each of us.
Mm.
And each person, men and women that he mentored and believed in, he really saw in each of us a hero. And even when we didn't necessarily have the ability to see it ourselves, or even have the awareness yet to acknowledge it, but he saw it. And for a lot of us, we're still trying to come into contact with what he saw 20 years ago. And we're just awakening to it. But the word inspire means to breathe life into something. And he inspired so many people by breathing life into their potential, by acknowledging that, you know what, you may be a little rough around the edges right now, but I see your potential. You matter. You have a voice. You have the potential of making a difference. And I can help put you in a position and put you around a group of people that can help shape you and hone you and mold you into what you're capable of becoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's deep. And is it, because you mentioned, I think he was your first mentor, correct?
He was the first mentor in my adult life, I would say. So I was 20 years old. I had just come back from Australia. I was doing a youth ministry thing over there. And I was totally lost and alone and just jaded, and didn't really know what I was going to do. And I was pretty arrogant, thought I knew it all, like most 20-year-olds. And he paid attention to me. He listened to me. He asked me a lot of questions. I asked him a lot of questions, and we had just a really great conversation. And it just kind of blossomed from there. And we lost touch over the last few years, but I always knew that that he was available, and that he thought highly of me, and that I respected him tremendously.
I see. And is that how your entrepreneur journey started, or can you explain a little bit of how that went?
Yeah, so I am, my dad was an Army officer growing up for the first 13 years of my life. And then when I was 13 or 14, he left the regular Army and went into the reserves and began his career as a financial advisor. And he started our firm, 30 plus years ago. And I swore I would never join the family business. And so I went to pursue a degree in public relations and business. And I thought I was going to go into that world. And even prior to that, I actually, my real passion was acting, on doing stage and theater and all of that stuff. And I wanted to make a career out of that. But my dad wanted me to get a real job. He didn't want to see me suffer and struggle. And he said it was going to be really hard. And I didn't like the idea of struggling and suffering. I didn't really understand it. And not only that, but I also, I wanted to, at that moment, the light that was my dad was shining on me, right? And that was something that I had wanted a lot growing up, similar to you, right? I think a lot of us have these experiences. And so I said, you know what? Okay, I'll switch. I'll get a business degree, and so that's what I ultimately did. And shortly before I began that career, I realized, I just got to do something more than help people decide which ice cream to buy. And so I called them up and I said, I'm going to give you the opportunity of a lifetime. And and he said, "What's that?" And I said, I'm going to prove you right. I'm going to join the family business. And so that was in 2004. And, it's been a journey ever since, but I made that call and gave him that opportunity on one condition, that I was going to succeed or fail on my own. And that's mostly true, but we did collaborate quite a bit on stuff. He didn't give me anything, but we definitely collaborated, and we have very different styles. And in that process of doing something I never thought I would do, I have learned a lot about myself, right? I learned that all of my experiences leading up to today, I can still use them, right? I can still deploy them. They are not useless. They still have value, and I can just reposition them, right? They're not lost. And it also, as a result of that acknowledgement and seeing that, I learned that I have the ability to have impact in people's lives in other ways, to help them see who they are capable of becoming, and that they should focus on not just doing, but becoming, and integrating the two. And we're in this society right now where we're kind of have been at this cultural movement, this wave of just doing and doing and doing and accumulating and amassing, and people are suffering as a result of it, right? They've lost sight of who they are and why they are and what's at stake and why it all matters. And my purpose, I believe, is to be a facilitator of that conversation, to remind people who they are, why they matter, what they're capable of, and why they should integrate the becoming and the doing.
Exactly. Wow, that's a great purpose to have. You just sorry, I'm laughing because now I got more questions. I want to go to in the beginning you mentioned, like, yeah, I didn't want to struggle and suffer. And I'm just wondering, what's your view now on struggling and suffering?
That's the only way to grow, baby. If you want to build confidence. So here's the thing. So I am still a good actor, right? I had experts in that domain when I was young. I'm 39 now, so, almost 20 years ago. I had experts in that domain say, Mike, you are good. You should pursue this. You should go down this path and see what happens. Mm. And yet the voice that mattered most to me was, at that point in time, was my father, right? I wanted his attention, and this was the way to get it. And so, the way to build confidence is by to acknowledge that something might be difficult, and to build a plan to accomplish it in a way that incrementally builds your confidence. And the only way you're going to do that is to get up, to run, to stumble, and to fall, to take action. Because what ultimately is going to happen is you are either we all live and we all die. How we live and how we die is up to us largely, and in either case, it involves risk. There's risk in taking action, and there's risk in not taking action. One, the risk of taking action, you will struggle. There will be setbacks. Not everything goes, from A to Z swimmingly, right? There's setbacks, there's learnings, there's adaptations, all of that stuff. And people see it, and people celebrate it. People acknowledge it. And there will be people on the other side of things saying, ooh, you're struggling, you're suffering. But there will be people that will be champions for you as well, that will encourage you. And that is uplifting, versus the opposite, which is also risky, which is suffering silently because you recognize internally that you're not realizing your potential, that you have a story, that it matters, that you have gifts, that you have the ability to take action, and that you want to surround yourself with a community of people that support you. Most people right now, a lot of people, maybe not most, but a lot of people are suffering silently.
Mm-hmm.
And they're disengaged from life. They're literally in an office building right now. Maybe they're watching this. Maybe they're at their work watching this right now, and they're totally disengaged from the vision of the company that they work for. Why is that? So one of the things that I'm trying to do is solve that gap as well, to help companies and individuals realign and serve each other, so that your top performer, they might be your top salesperson, top consultant, whatever it is, but they're really, at the end of the day, they're not thinking about your business. They're thinking about opening up a flower shop.
Mm-hmm.
So what if the company and that top consultant who is thinking about opening up a flower shop, what if they got together and worked on a way to help that person develop their story more, so that they can be more fully engaged in the business where they're working, or have an exit plan to leave? Because the company doesn't want a disengaged person, and the person doesn't want to be disengaged either, because that's a miserable place to be. So let's live an engaged life. Let's live a life where we have a clear idea of what our purpose is, what we're here to facilitate.
Absolutely. So in regards to purpose, right? Because I have the feeling, I'm 41 now, and I have the feeling like for the last year, 2 years, I'm really discovering what my purpose is, and I'm really working on it. But the first 39, 40 years of my life, I now feel like not wasted, but like I wasn't living towards like what I should be really living towards. How do you facilitate, or how could someone that's watching right now and thinking like, yeah, I kind of feel like that. You know, I'm just walking, I call that the zombie dad, just walking around through life, just trying to make it through the days instead of really living a full day, right?
Yeah.
How can somebody really align himself or find that purpose for him?
So the number one thing, the very first thing that the dad that's listening to this right now, that desires to become a fearless father, right? The number one thing that he can do is to stop focusing on finding his why, but rather remember that he is worthy of one to begin with.
I like that. Mm-hmm.
That is the first place to start, to remember that you are worthy. And it's not about you. It's not, you know, there's this whole concept of self-love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, self-love is not about living my truth, right? It's about living our truth and acknowledging that we are all worthy, that we all have gifts, that we're all capable. What ends up happening is that, and the number one problem with the self-love movement right now is that it's oriented toward me. It's oriented toward self, right? The self-love should be the selfless love, which means that if you want love, give it first. If you want mercy, give it first. If you want gratitude, give thanks first. If you want to feel worthy and to be reminded that you are worthy of a why, remind someone else that they are worthy. When you walk around, so I'm a Christian. I believe that we are all created by a God who loves us and wants the best for us, and who has said that we can do things far greater than we can possibly ask or imagine. And regardless of one's faith background, we are created. Okay.
Mm.
And we are wired to create. And when I walk around, and I don't do this perfectly because I'm human, right? I fail all the time. But when I walk around, when I look at you and I say, wow, he was willed into existence. Somebody thought about creating him,
Mm.
you know? And there's power in that. And if we live life that way as fathers, man, we can change the world.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's let me phrase that correctly. That's, in my opinion, the thing, right? We should change the world, especially what we see around us and the way we just pretty much destroying it. So, do I understand you correctly that you think that the self-love movement that's going on right now is not helping, but adding towards making it a worse place instead of trying to finally have us decide, okay, we really need to do something to change the world? And I loved one thing that I heard on one of the motivational um, videos that I watch on YouTube, and he was saying, like, I always try, wherever I go, I try to leave it a better place when I leave, and that's the way I see my life. So I'm going to leave this world, but I'm going to do my utmost best to leave it better than when I got in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the self-love movement, for lack of a better phrase, is well intended but misguided.
Mm.
Because you constantly hear, like, I'm going to live my truth, you live your truth, you know? So that means that we all have our own truths. Well, that is absolutely moronic. That's not true at all.
Mm.
Like, we all share some principled, fundamental, universally true truths, that we are all created, that we are all wired to create in some way, that we are all worthy of being loved, and that the only way to effectively make all of that happen is to move from a place of needing it ourselves to giving it.
Right. And yeah, I keep coming up with more questions. Just in regards to then, you're looking for your own purpose. You mentioned it, like, okay, we first have to realize that, okay, I'm worthy of, being here, having a purpose, etc. Does it extra benefit me finding my own purpose if I find people that already have a clear purpose and focus on, instead of focusing, okay, I'm going to really find my purpose, giving to them towards them manifesting even more their purpose?
So here's the number one problem with purpose, okay? People associate their purpose with what they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That has nothing to do really with your purpose.
Okay.
Ultimately, a better question than asking, what is my purpose or what am I good at, is, what am I here to facilitate?
Mm.
Right? And if you think about, so coming out in 2019, I wrote a book. It's called Master the Key, A Story to Free Your Potential. And it's coming out in February of 2019. And one of these, it's a fictional story that leads you to the truth. And one of the characters in that story is a woman, a violinist named Chaz Cho. And she's an incredible violinist. She's based partly on a real person who's a brilliant violinist, Juilliard trained violinist, plays all over the world. But let me ask you a question. If Chaz Cho loses her ability to play the violin, and she has associated her value with her ability to play the violin, what happens? Then
Yeah.
She feels worthless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus if she has the ability and comes to a conclusion through introspection and work and questions and community to recognize that her actual purpose is to facilitate healing and emotion and movement and unification through music. If she realizes that her core purpose is to facilitate that, then playing the violin is just an expression of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if she ever loses the ability to express that purpose through the violin, she has not lost her purpose. She's just lost a one way of expressing it. She can go about finding another way. But that brings up another point. We have to have the ability and the willingness to learn new ways to facilitate our purpose. You know, you look at Olympic athletes, they have dedicated their entire quarter of their life, usually, sometimes into their 30s, to elite level performance, to competition, to winning, to being the best. And then they retire and they have their whole life in front of them. Was their purpose just to be an Olympic athlete, to be a competitor? If you talk to elite athletes that have assigned their value with the ability to compete at a high level, and then you take that away from them, what ends up happening is they end up becoming very depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true of anybody that assigns their worth with their expression of it, right? And so it's really, really important to identify what you're here to facilitate. That is universally true, whether it's on a conversation like this, or at a coffee shop, or closing a business deal, or writing a book. All of those things are expressions of what we are here to facilitate.
Mm.
We just have to acknowledge that the way that we're using our vessel might change, but its purpose does not.
Exactly. So you writing a book is one of your ways to
facilitate my purpose.
exactly. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I never thought I would write a book.
Mm.
It wasn't on my bucket list or anything. As I became more aware of what I'm here to facilitate, and what my potential is, it just naturally came about, you know, and it came about through conversations like this and through people asking me, when are you going to write a book? So when people are starting to ask you questions, they're seeing glimpses of your potential.
Mm-hmm.
You need to tug on that thread. That's a hint.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In that case, where you mentioned that people start asking you questions, you mentioned it a little bit before, you know, environment that makes it so important, right? You can tell sometimes I used to be in a really bad environment where people weren't stimulating me enough to really reach my full potential, right? And I kept hearing it more and more, find your environment. And it's very difficult for me. I live in Spain. Spanish is it's my third language, English my second, and Dutch is my first. So I have a difficult time to communicate on that kind of level with people in Spanish. So I've always been wondering, like, I'm starting to create a better environment, but how would somebody in this, let's say, international world, right, where it's so much easier to communicate with everybody, how can somebody create the right environment for themselves with the right people that then would challenge them with such questions that you're talking about?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I actually talk about that. That's the fourth part of my book. It's called Community.
Nice.
And it's those 3 C's. It's that that you find people, you identify people who are wildly curious about your success as much as they are about their own.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a wildly curious person. You're seeking out people. You can do the same thing in your community. You can observe, like, who's a wildly curious person? Like, who's got their hands in a bunch of stuff, like, and you can reach out to them and you can talk about ways to collaborate. That's the second C. They're interested in collaborating. They want to perform, to create an ensemble. They realize that we're better together, right? And the third thing is that over time, through the experience of being wildly curious and through collaborating, they earn the ability to correct you when they see you deviating from what you are capable of doing. When they see you not living up to your full potential, when they see you getting off course, they don't course challenge you, they course correct you.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned curiosity a couple of times. I actually just bought a book called Curiosity because I have the feeling I'm not curious enough, even though maybe now in this conversation it might seem, but I also think that that's the person. No, for me, it's really easy to talk with you, and it's really easy for me to ask you questions and stuff like that. How do you become more curious? Because you mentioned curiosity is so important, right? So what's your advice on how can somebody become more curious towards other people?
Yeah, I think reading is a really good way. I mean, I've read so many books in the last couple of years. That's definitely a way of being curious, and reading books that you don't necessarily agree with either. To open your mind to those kinds of things. I think that one of the best ways to develop curiosity is to go do challenging things that are hard, like, so you can see what you're capable of, and so you can, go join a CrossFit and start learning how the body moves and start asking questions and learning about the fundamentals of those kinds of things, because those are, the way our body moves is rooted in principles, right? And in general. So I think that exercise and getting out there and doing hard things is one way to develop curiosity. Another way of developing curiosity is asking questions, which you do a lot. You're obviously curious. And then another way to develop curiosity is to go, like, do something that you're really afraid of, like reach out to someone that you are afraid of reaching out to. Before you do that, instead of saying, how can I help you? Because, there's this whole idea that's going around right now that how can I help you is a really terrible question to ask. I think that's a very arrogant position to take. I think how can I help you is a very interesting question, because it shows that you have another curious person on the end of that. And I don't know the answer to how can I help you. And a lot of people who are busy get frustrated with that because you've just put a burden of responsibility on the other person to answer that question. And so it's not really a great question, but I don't think it's a terrible question, especially when you are asking it of a person you've never met before, right? If you've worked with someone before and they ask you, how can I help you? You should be way more willing to have a conversation about that. It's two different scenarios. But if you want to do something or talk to somebody that intimidates you, you should spend some time reading what they've written or watching the videos they've recorded or something along those lines, and comment on them and engage with them and share their work and share another article that's related to their work. I mean, these are how relationships are built and how not just in a fickle way, but in a way that ultimately builds bonds of trust. You know, that they don't necessarily feel like you want something from them. I think how can I help you is a good question that you can ask in the right scenarios. And frankly, I think that too many people have taken a too harsh of a stance on the opposite way. It can be at the core reason. I believe that generally speaking, people are good. I take the benefit of the doubt that people are good. And when someone asks, how can I help you? Or let me know how I can help you, you know, I'm going to take them up. I'm going to say, thanks. You know, I'm not going to respond with some snarky comment about how it's a worthless question, because it's not. They're acknowledging that they're curious and that it takes a community of people to change the world.
Exactly. That's great. I'm really enjoying this, Mike. I'm really connecting. I think I can go on for another hour. However, you know, we came to the end, and I'm just wondering, in case fathers that are watching this now or later on, if they have any other questions, if they want to keep following you, because as you mentioned, next year, February, you're coming out with your book. I'm sure, like me, they want to know exactly what the date is, etc. How can they get in contact with you? How can they follow you, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on social media. I do Facebook, but I'm on Instagram more frequently at The Impact Mike. They could also go to theimpactentrepreneur.net. That is my website for the podcast, and they can listen to the podcast on basically anywhere at, you know, iTunes or Stitcher or on the web. And if they want more information as the stuff comes available on the book, they can, you know, drop their email address in. And if they're located in North America, I can add them to a big text group that I've organized. If they're international, I will email them as information comes out about the book beginning in January. I don't like spamming people with noise. Everybody's busy. They've got their inboxes full. So if you get something from me, it's going to be valuable.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Well, I will keep looking out for that, because I would like, if possible, a signed copy by the time that it comes out. Really looking forward to it. Mike, thank you so much for being on. I had a blast. I learned tons. So, yeah. In regards to, you mentioned you have a podcast. Did I see correctly? You already have 141 interviews done yourself. Is that true?
Yeah. There's 141 episodes as of this week, and just rocking and rolling.
Wow, that's amazing, man. What's just to end? Sorry, man, because I know I'm going to keep going asking questions. I apologize. Just the last question before we go. What's like one huge golden nugget that you can give to somebody like me that's just starting to podcast, or in my case, it's more like vlogging, right?
Right. One piece of advice, I would say, you know, do your homework in advance. Like preparation is everything, right? Mm-hmm. I would have a set of questions that you want to use as a guide. I would have a structure that you want your show to follow in general, and you know, a beginning, a middle, and an end, because you're telling your story. And don't be afraid not to air something, right? Mm-hmm. Because ultimately you are doing this not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of the audience. And sometimes you're not going to be able to air content because either the quality is not there, or there's just the energy's flat or whatever. But you have to respect the people who are listening to your show and to dedicating their free time, their ears and their minds and their hearts to your content.
Great. Thanks. I appreciate that. Again, thank you so much for being on. As I said, I got tons of questions more. I actually deviated completely from what I wanted to ask. So, man, hopefully in the future we can set this up again. And for now, again, thanks. Good luck with all your projects and good luck with the launch. I know that can be bring on a little bit of extra stress.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a great day.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Are you still meeting up with your friends now that you're a father? Kids making you stress out. You got no time for yourself to work out, read, or relax. Can you still remember the time you were hanging out with your friends, feeling energetic, happy, and confident? Spending time together and talking about your life and your crazy dreams. You're feeling alone now, don't you? No one to share your challenges with, and you're just running around from one storm into the next. Well, it's time to change this now. Join me and the Brotherhood of Fearless Fathers to speak on a weekly basis with like-minded dads to crush your challenges, face your fears with determination, be held accountable, and regain control of your life. If you want to become the hero your family needs you to be, then go to becomeafearlessfather.com/brotherhood. I'm looking forward to seeing you on one of our next calls.